Packers 49ers. Really looking forward to this one. I know injuries are going to play a major factor, and it doesn't quite have the sizzle. If this was a game where everyone was healthy, including Brock Purdy and Nick Bosa and Brandon Ayuk and obviously Jair Alexander, Edgerrin Cooper, etc. But it is what we get. It still should be a fun one. It's still going to be a huge game for the Packers. I think all you sort of need to know about this from a Packers standpoint, right, is just how much this can change the Packers playoff odds if they do in fact win this game. As of right now, and this is always for like the New York Times playoff simulator, right? But they're right around an 85% chance to make the playoffs. It changes drastically if they win or lose this game. So it goes up to about 95, 96% chance to make the playoffs if they win this game. It goes down to about 73, 74% if they lose this game. So it is about a 22% difference in playoff probability. You're giving yourself a 1 in 5 better chance to make the playoffs if you win this game than if you don't win this game. And of course, I think it would also be a huge level of disappointment, right? If you don't win a Brandon Allen led 49ers game, if you can't pick up that win against the 49ers at home, 2 weeks following your bye, like this has got to be a win for Green Bay. And I know those are the ones that kind of are less enjoyable to some extent because I don't think this is like a trap game. I think everyone understands the importance of this game and that Green Bay needs to win it. So I don't think, and again, the 49ers have had Green Bay's number, right? So I don't think Green Bay's overlooking this 49ers team in any way, shape, or form. But I think as like a fan, it's almost like you're sometimes in a no-win situation, right? Because if you win big, it's like, oh yeah, well, they were supposed to. They were playing Brandon Allen. What the hell did you expect? Of course they were going to win big. If they win by just a little, it's like, oh, yeah, they won, but they should have won by so much more. And if you lose by a little, it's like, oh my God, they lost to the Brandon Allen 49ers. And if they lose by a lot, it's just like catastrophic, right? So these are the ones that for me are always just a little bit more, I don't want to say like nerve wracking, but just like a little bit more of like, the expectations change your view of it. And I think your expectations are like Green Bay should win by like 10 points in this game. It's never that easy. Every single week in the NFL is a little bit different. I guarantee the 49ers are going to have a great game plan, but you're at home. It's Brandon Allen backup QB time, and you got to find a way to win. Not to mention Nick Bosa, Brandon Ayuk. There's a plethora of super important 49ers that are out in this game. Not to say that Green Bay doesn't have its own injury issues, right? Because Jair and Edgerrin Cooper are going to be super impactful being out on defense, but this is one that Green Bay certainly has to find a way to win. And I think they will. I absolutely think they will win this game. But again, it'll be a little bit different viewing experience than if this was a straight up battle between two phenomenal teams. It just, again, changes sort of the viewpoint a little bit. I will get to as many of your questions as I possibly can. Should have about right up until 11:30. I might have to go just a little bit sooner. I always say this, but it's 1,000,000% true. I do have to get my kid to basketball practice for noon today. So I'm going to do that and then head over to the game. And then we'll go from there. But we'll get to as many questions as we can. All right. She said, Joey, do you think Stokes gets to start at corner today, or will they go with Nixon and Valentine on the outsides? My assumption is that it'll carry over from what they did last week, and it'll be Nixon and Valentine on the outside with Javon Bullard in the slot, and then Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney at safety. Now, the only thing that would potentially change this is if they decided that they wanted to go a little bit more man, or if they wanted more cover guys on the field based on the 49ers having three pretty good wide receivers in Pearsall, Jennings, and Deebo Samuel. If that were the case, if Green Bay felt like, hey, we don't know that Javon Bullard can match up quite as well with all three of those or any of those three wide receivers if they end up in the slot, then in that situation, you could go with Stokes and Valentine on the outside with Nixon in the slot, and it could affect Bullard's playing time. But my hope is that Valentine is still ahead of Stokes. He did not do anything to dissuade that. I think last week, it wasn't a great game from Valentine, but it was still, I think, better than anything really Stokes has put on tape this year. And Matt LaFleur echoed again this week of how excited they are about Valentine. So my hope, of course, is that Valentine is ahead of Stokes. How the rest of that defensive, I mean, we know Williams and McKinney will be at safety, right? We know Nixon is going to be out there in some capacity. So then I think the question is between Stokes and Bullard. And I think you, me, and everyone would probably prefer Bullard to be out there. But if they do feel like they need a more, cover guy out there rather than, again, a big nickel, somebody who can probably be a little bit more effective against the run, then they could do the three corners. But just think about this logically, right? That yes, they're going to be worried about the wide receivers. They're going to be more worried about Christian McCaffrey, which makes me believe that Bullard will be in the slot. And then again, I think Valentine and Nixon on the outsides. All right. Super chats come in first, of course. Love in the 2023 draft class. Hide Goody's flaws. I think with every single GM, there are strengths and weaknesses. All right. I think early on, and here, actually, before I even get to this, I think one other thing that people ultimately need to realize too is GMs, just like players in this league, take time to find their footing and to see what works and doesn't work. And there's going to be some hits and misses along the way. Jimmy Graham was a miss along the way. Like that was one of his first big moves, right? That was a miss. And then I think he's learned from that. And I think, obviously those first couple drafts outside of Jair Alexander, right? There was a lot of misses in those drafts. And I think he's sort of learned from some of that as well. So yes, there's definitely been some misses for Goody along the way. And I think one of the big things that we have to look at right now is the play of the first round picks. It's just not good enough. It just is very, very clearly and evidently not good enough for this team to be where they want to be. I talked about this previously, but I was having a conversation with a friend last week. And if Green Bay does not reach their potential, if they do not have the ability to go on some sort of Super Bowl run, I think you can take a very large look at Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, LVN, to a lesser extent, Jordan Morgan. But all of those first round picks, I'm missing some too off the top of my head. Eric Stokes, Darnell Savage, we can look at those and say, that's why this team isn't where they are. Now, I care less about, sometimes just the first round picks, right? I look at a draft class in totality. And to me, it doesn't really matter if you can get like one really good guy and three, like one really great player, a couple good players and maybe a rotational player or two, like you're pretty good in any given draft class. So for example, right, if in 2024, Evan Williams was your first round pick, right? Edgerrin Cooper was selected where he was as the second round pick. Javon Bullard was selected where he was as a second round pick. And then Jordan Morgan was the third round pick, right? Like if you had that, are you really super concerned about it? Probably not, right? Like you're like, oh wow, they got an unbelievable safety in the first round. Their 2 second round picks look good. And Jordan Morgan's a really nice flyer who's already rotating in on the offensive line in the third round. You probably wouldn't care all that much. In 2023, right? If Jaden Reed was your first round pick, and then it was Tucker Kraft and who do we want to put there? We'll say Tucker Kraft and we'll just say Luke Musgrave still as your second round picks, because I think Musgrave's still expected to be good. He's just been injured, right? So we'll say Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave were your second round picks. And again, Jaden Reed was your first. In the third round, they took Dontavian Wicks. In the fourth round, they took Carl Brooks. And then in the fifth round, they took fifth round, they took Carrington Valentine and Lucas Van Ness. And, we can go from there, right? It doesn't look as bad that Van Ness was like a fourth or fifth round pick and that Jaden Reed was a first. Like you still feel good about that draft class as a whole. In 2022, if Zach Tom was your first rounder, along with Rasheed Walker, if Zach Tom, they took 2 offensive tackles, Zach Tom and Rasheed Walker in the first round, and they're both really good starting tackles, you probably wouldn't be upset about that. If Christian Watson probably can stay as your 2, Romeo Dobbs was your 3, Sean Ryan was your 4, and then, Devontae Wyatt was your other 4, Quay Walker was your 5, and then Kingsley Enagbare was a 7th, and so on and so forth. Like you feel much better about that draft class. So now again, we can look at 2021, which is an unmitigated nightmare, right? Stokes, major bust. Myers, fine, but obviously the Creed Humphrey scenario, it really clouds that one. And even Myers, just as a second round pick, has not lived up to expectations at all. Amari Rodgers, bust. Royce Newman, bust. TJ Slayton, probably right around or above expectation of what you're going to get out of a 5th round pick more often than not. Shamarjon Charles, bust for Green Bay at least. Cole Van Lannon, bust. Isaiah McDuffie, again, at expectations for what you're going to get out of a 6th round pick. That one's fine. And Kylan Hill, 7th, but you can't spin that one. You can't say, well, TJ Slayton's the 1st round pick and Isaiah McDuffie's the 2nd round. No matter what, that's a bad draft class. 2020, it's Jordan Love in a cloud of dust, right? Like it's Jordan Love. John Runyon Jr. as a 6th round pick is a good pick. They got 4 solid years out of him. Everything else is a nightmare in that draft. Rashawn Gary, fine in the 1st, although there were probably better options out there. Montez Sweat or Brian Burns probably being 2 of those, right? Elton Jenkins in the 2nd, you feel good about. Everything else, pretty much a nightmare, right? Darnell Savage, not great. Jay Sternberger, massive bust. Kingsley Keke, bust. Kadar Hallman, bust. Dexter Williams, bust. Ty Summers, bust. 2018 is just Jair Alexander and a bunch of nothing. MVS in the 5th round gets you, again, I think what you hope out of that pick, but everything else was a nightmare. And that's it. So I think some of these draft classes, you can really look at, the overall outcome of it and say, all right, it's good. And I think you can take some undrafted free agents in that as well. I think in free agency, he's been pretty darn good finding values. I think their ability to pick guys up off of practice squads like Bo Melton and Alan Lazard and players like that, even Eric Wilson, et cetera, is super impressive. I think, from a, again, big time free agents standpoint, Adrian Amos, Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs, those have all worked out pretty damn well. So I think there's a variety of different ways to evaluate a GM. I think overall his mid-round pick drafting has been really, really good on the whole. And I think finding, again, like in one draft, finding a Sean Ryan, a Zach Tom, and a Rasheed Walker, 3/5 of your really good starting offensive line in all basically, third round pick or later of the draft is unbelievable. I mean, obviously getting a franchise quarterback in Jordan Love is unbelievable. There's a lot that Goody has done really, really well. I think there's still some things that he's trying to iron out. And I think if like two of those first round picks work out just a little bit better, right? If we're talking about LVN as a really good defensive end, if we're talking about Jordan Morgan already is looking like the next Elton Jenkins, if we're talking about Eric Stokes being a legitimately good starting corner, if we're any of those things, right? This probably looks a whole hell of a lot different. But I think the string of first round picks being extreme disappointments is what changes the calculus a little bit and swings it in the favor of like, there's still work to do. It's not quite good enough. On the whole, I think Goody's done a great job. And especially when you consider like rebuilding this, the trade of Aaron Rodgers was a master class of getting not only out of that contract, you could argue and go back and say giving him that contract in the first place was a big time failure, which it was, but he course corrected and then put on a master class of how to get out of that deal and pick up draft picks in the, and gain those draft picks out of it. But then you could go back and say, yeah, but he used that one of those first round picks to move up to go get LVN. So there's there's layers to this on all levels. On the whole, I think Goody does a really good job. Are there some things that, just like we talk about with a Jordan Love or a player on the field, are there some things that he still needs to clean up and be better at? Yes. And I think primarily it starts with his first round pick decisions. And I'll just to kind of wrap this, because I know this is a preview show and we're not talking about draft philosophy here, so I apologize. But when we start talking draft and philosophy, that's like my ultimate nerd goes off. So I overall appreciate the fact that Goody is going big game hunting in the first rounds. Like he's looking for what he thinks players who can become all pro level players. And I think at the beginning, like Jair Alexander was a pretty big swing. And that one, before the injuries paid off. I think you could argue the same thing for Rashawn Gary pre-ACL. That one was paying off in a significant way. Jordan Love was paying off in a significant way, right? Like, so those home run swings, if they pay off, are huge, but you have to make contact every once in a while. You can't have a string of first round picks that are just well below average and not helping you at your, some key positions, right? Philosophically, I don't hate what he's doing, but there needs to be better contact with it. And I think he will. I think he's going to have to, but that's going to be, I think, a huge reason right now where this Packers team is just a little bit under where you are hoping they would be. I think a lot of that is Eric Stokes, LVN, Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, Jordan Morgan, et cetera. Just those first round picks not playing up to expectations. Ken G gifted 5 Pack-A-Day podcast memberships. Ken G, you are amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. Hopefully the 5 of you who check that out really enjoy those memberships. I know you will. But yeah, make sure to check out Pack-A-Day memberships if you have not already. We're over 800 members at the moment, which is unbelievable. So thank you guys so much for that. With Edge out, why not elevate Jamin Davis? I was a little bit surprised at this as well. I thought that would be something that would be kind of an apples to apples super athletic linebacker. Not necessarily that you have to play him, but if you want to get somebody in there that can do some spine and, maybe do a little bit of blitzing, like just super athlete linebacker, I thought they could do that, even just to give them a little bit more special teams depth, where linebackers are usually super key to what you're doing on teams, even just to give them depth at linebacker, right? They play 3 linebackers, so they're one injury away from only having 3 linebackers on the team, or just even available. So I was a little bit surprised by that, but they're probably just going to go Wilson, McDuffie, Quay through the entirety of the game and figure if they have one injury, they'll just fill in with Tyron Hopper. I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think this is egregiously bad decision or anything, but I would have expected that probably Jamin Davis would have been called up, and they easily could have done it. There's definitely guys like, if Colby Wooden can't go, or if they want to give him an extra week of rest, heck, a lot of times they only go with 4 defensive tackles anyway. So they easily could have deactivated. We know Jair and Edgerrin Cooper are going to be deactivated, right? Travis Glover's deactivated every week. Tunnel Adapo's deactivated every week. And then you could just deactivate Colby Wooden as your 5th, giving him that extra week to heal up. And then Jamin Davis can get called up, and you have an easy solution there, right? So I was a little bit surprised that they didn't, but clearly they have a plan and they're sticking with it. Nash, I agree. Let's go Pack. Feels like this is the game where the Packers finally put it all together on offense. I hope so. I think the red zone offense is going to be key in this game for both teams, 49ers and Packers. I do expect San Francisco to still be able to move the ball. Like, listen, when you've got 3 good wide receivers, a great tight end, a great running back, a good backup running back, an unbelievable fullback, the best left tackle in football, assuming that he plays, there's still a ton of talent on this 49ers offense. And the maestro has changed. The quarterback in this one is going to be a little bit different, and you're not going to have that extreme playmaking ability, but we know that Kyle Shanahan can get his quarterbacks into, advantageous looks, right? Some easy reads, some easy decisions. And I'm sure Kyle Shanahan's going to be in his bag in this one. So I still expect the 49ers to move the ball. How the Packers defense fares in the red zone when things tighten up and it gets harder for Brandon Allen, I think that's going to be key. And then we know this Green Bay offense has to be better in the red zone on their side. So red zone offense, a huge one in this one. Dennis, I agree. Let's get the win. People saying this could be a Tommy DeVito or Bryce Young performance from last year for Brandon Allen. I don't see it. This is a different defense. She said, Joey, I hope you're right. I hope it's not that. I pointed back to the CJ Beathard game in 2019, 2018. I forget which one it was. 2018, I think, where, CJ Beathard came in with that 49ers offense and put up 30 points. They were up by 7 in the fourth quarter, and it took a couple Aaron Rodgers big time drives at the end to go win that game in the final moments. So I think for me, I want to see this Packers team go out and show me that, hey, this is not going to be a similar performance to that. I mean, I think you can point to Caleb Williams last week, right? If you look at it's a similar sort of group of weapons that the 49ers, in fact, I would argue better, right? McCaffrey over Swift, Juszczyk over anything that they have at fullback, Kittle over Kmet. And then, I think Chicago's wide receivers are probably a bit better than 49ers at this point. But, Deebo Samuel to DJ Moore, there's some similarities there. Jawan Jennings to Keelan Allen, there's some similarities there. And then, the 2 rookies, right? Ricky Pearsall and Roma Dunze. So this is like a very similar group of weapons. I would actually give the nod to the 49ers. We saw the tackles get out in the run game, similar to what Trent Williams can do. I think the offensive lines are actually fairly similar as well, but Trent Williams probably gives the 49ers a bit of a nod. And then you have let's just say, inexperienced-ish quarterback, right? Caleb Williams as a rookie, super talented, but not quite there yet. Brandon Allen, not as talented, has had a few more years in the league to sort of figure some things out. But I think it's a similar sort of, offense that you can structure for Brandon Allen that we saw the Bears run against Green Bay this past week. And I'm sure they're going to try a lot of the similar things that Chicago did. And Caleb Williams in that offense moved the ball down the field on the Packers every single time. So I'm hoping that this is not a Tommy DeVito, Bryce Young performance. I think Green Bay has to be much better than that. This is at home. Those DeVito and Bryce Young games were on the road last year. I think that does change the calculus a bit. Hopefully the Packers fans are extra loud in this one. But either way, got to find a way to come out with a win, and got to find a way that we're not talking about Brandon Allen and the 49ers offense putting up 30 in this game, right? Like, it's got to be 20 or under. Got to find a way to be 20 or under in this game for that offense. Green Ranger, good to see you. King Kermit, I am doing great. I'm sounding ever so slightly under the weather. Probably just because, I don't know, I have the allergies. I don't know. I feel totally fine. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a little extra, I don't know, tired or something. But no, I feel great. So no issues on my end. I don't believe Adrian Amos is still on the 49ers. However, there are a plethora of former Packers that are bouncing around that team. I think primarily on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think there's any on offense. I should say defense and special teams. Devondre Campbell at linebacker, former Green Bay Packer. Isaac Yiadom at corner, former Green Bay Packer. And then you have Pat O'Donnell at punter, Tabor Pepper as their long snapper. And then they've also got Jonathan Garvin on their practice squad, Patrick Taylor, the running back, on their practice squad. And that's it. I think that's it. I don't think anyone else has ever spent any time in Green Bay. So, but there are multiple Green Bay Packers that are on this team in some capacity, but no Adrian Amos anymore on this team. Go Pack, go. Love it, King Kermit. Screw how we win. A win is a win. Fair enough. Allen has been in their system for several years. No guarantee he's a screw up. I don't think he's been there that long, has he? He has been in San Fran for this is his second year. He was in San Fran since 2023. Now he's been in similar systems, right? Cincinnati, 2020, 2021, 2022. He's been with the Rams and even LaFleur had him for a little bit of time, but no, he's only been there for, 2 years, 23 and 24. So not a ton of time, but he'll still know what he's doing. I don't have any concern about that. Kent, go Pack, go. Are you surprised the 49ers didn't go with Dobbs instead of Allen? Not exactly. When I first saw both quarterbacks, I kind of would have assumed that Dobbs was the backup. But if you kind of think about it a little bit more, right? Like, I don't think Dobbs is the perfect, I'll just say it again, maestro for this sort of offense. I think timing, rhythm, consistency, getting the ball out of your hands are sort of key to this Kyle Shanahan offense. And Josh Dobbs is more of a agent of chaos, more like, I'm going to dance around, run around, do a bunch of crazy things. I might run for 150 yards, and we might be able to do some read option stuff and things like that. But if you want to actually run this Kyle Shanahan offense and get the ball out of your hands and know where you're going at all times, Dobbs has not been great at doing that through the course of his career. So, I would say if he actually wants to run his offense, and again, kind of like we just talked about, go with somebody that's been in the offense for a couple of years, I think Brandon Allen actually could make a little bit more sense in this one. But it's worth noting that they do have Dobbs, right? And if things do not go well with Brandon Allen, we could see Josh Dobbs. We could see packages where they have Josh Dobbs. We've seen them in the past against Green Bay bring Trey Lance in some goal line situations, just to run the football more. So in the red zone, especially where San Fran has been struggling, could we see some Josh Dobbs in there? Yeah, sure. Could we see him in certain situations? Absolutely. So I think it's something Green Bay is going to have to at least be prepared for and aware of, is that, hey, at any time they could bring in Dobbs and it could be a much more run-oriented offense and a little bit more of, like I said, that agent of chaos. But if you actually want to run the offense, I think Brandon Allen does make a little bit more sense for this. Can't blame Goody when people don't develop. All right, so let's talk about that. And I know, again, we don't want to talk draft here the entire time. Number one is when you're drafting and developing, right? Part of that is finding players that you think can and will develop. There's a science to that as well. Like it's not necessarily like, let's take Darnell Savage, right? If Darnell Savage would have gone to Jacksonville and just started tearing it up, right? Then you could have said, all right, well, clearly something was wrong with the way they utilized him or coached him in Green Bay. Like you could have made that argument with a Casey Hayward, a Micah Hyde, right? Those are clear tells that, hey, they didn't use those guys right, or they gave up too early in Green Bay, and Hayward and Hyde were clearly great draft picks that Green Bay sort of blew by either getting rid of them, which is partly Goody's fault, but by not utilizing them correctly. Like you could say that. I think part of it is evaluating which players are going to be able to have those breakouts, and I don't think that has been done a great job of by Goody and company. Number two is, you can say, like, you can't blame when they don't develop. You could just get players that don't need to develop. I mean, Rashawn Gary is an example of, like, listen, Brian Burns was really good from day one. And we can talk about Burns not fitting the defense and things like that, but you make your defense fit a Brian Burns. Like, you just go get him and let him cook. Like, you figure that out. So there are opportunities, like, again, when LVN's there, like Christian Gonzalez is there. Christian Gonzalez is day one good. He doesn't need to develop. Like, there are players that you can draft right then and there that you don't need to bring in and develop. And I'm not talking like, well, they're not as good. No, Christian Gonzalez is a great corner. He's a really, really good corner. Brian Bird's a phenomenal defensive end. So it's not like these guys don't have the upside. It's that they had the immediate impact and they still have the upside of becoming Pro Bowl or all pro caliber players. So I think the philosophy needs to change a bit of, like, hey, if we are struggling, which has been a known issue in Green Bay with taking some of these guys early and not seeing them being able to break out in a significant way. If we are struggling with that, maybe we need to have a different philosophy of how we're going about and attacking those first round picks. Maybe it's not taking the LVN who's going to take 3 years to develop. Maybe it's not taking, whoever it might be, a Quay Walker who has barely started in the league. And I do think one of the lessons that you need to learn, right, is that being the guy, being a undeniable player at your school and being like already showing that in college is kind of important, right? Like, Eric Stokes was not the corner when he was at Georgia. Quay Walker was like the third or fourth linebacker at Georgia when he was in college. We talk about the LVN thing not starting. That's an Iowa thing that doesn't really matter. But, like, he wasn't like the guy along that defensive line at Iowa. Like, I think getting those guys that are already showing proof of, like, hey, I'm going to be the dominant alpha in this room and, like, I'm going to go out and dominate. I think getting more guys like that rather than guys that are, again, number 2, number 3 at their position on their own team in college, I think there's a lesson to be learned there as well. Those things have not turned out as great for Green Bay when it comes to developing these players. it's great that you see the upside. I think we all see the potential upside in an LVN and a Devonte Wyatt. Devonte Wyatt wasn't the guy in the defensive tackle position, right? Jordan Davis was, and even Jalen Carter to some extent was as well. Like, so Devonte Wyatt wasn't the guy along that line. Like, I think making sure that you're getting the guy, like somebody that's already shown that they're a big time impact performer and is already like an unquestioned star at his position on his college team. I think that probably gives you a little bit better indication of maybe what they're going to be able to do in college. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean they can't have the upside traits, right? They have to be able to have that too if you're picking in the first round. But at some point, you've got to do a better job of identifying that. And it doesn't always have to be draft and develop. It can be draft good players. Like, you can do that too. And sometimes that can work. And I think it probably would have worked out better if Green Bay went in that direction rather than just trying to continue to get guys that need 2-3 years or may just not develop at all. And which unfortunately we've seen in a couple of cases already. Sea Biscuits and Gravy, appreciative for the top tier Packers content. Sea Biscuits and Gravy, thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for being a member for 13 months. You're the absolute best. Cheddarhead, hoping Minnesota loses 3-0 in the most boring game ever. Yeah, I'm cool with that. I think Chicago's got a legitimate chance. I think the one really nice thing that Minnesota has against Chicago in this one, they're the better team. That always helps. But two is that Chicago now has that game plan on tape against Green Bay, whereas Green Bay had no idea what Thomas Brown was going to run in that game. They had to sort of prepare for everything. I think Minnesota now has that game plan on tape, and I think it's going to be harder for Chicago to sort of repeat that. But I think Chicago's defense can hold Minnesota's offense in check. So yeah, I think there's definitely a possibility of that. So we'll see. We'll kind of take a look at how that game looks. But hopefully, I think in every universe, you want Chicago to win that game, right? We're kind of Bears fans today because Minnesota losing is great. Chicago winning hurts their draft pick status, and maybe just like, hey, maybe we should keep the head coach there. Maybe Matt Eberflus is a really good head coach that we should keep around in Chicago. So I think we're Bears fans today. Weird to say, but I think it's true. I mean, you can cheer for the Meteor, I guess, but outside of that, I think we're kind of Bears fans today. We hear about the need for a better pass rush, but we also know the cornerback situation isn't great. Is it more that the pass rush is affecting the quality of the pass coverage or vice versa? I think we can evaluate each individually, right? And I think we can say, like, I would actually argue to you at the cornerback position that based on expectation, based on Jair being hurt, and some of the pieces that they've had to move around, not having a ton of talent in that room, and there not being pass rush, I could actually make an argument to you that I think the corner room is slightly overachieving based on circumstances, based on the lack of talent. And I say this on the field. I say developmentally, they're underachieving. Eric Stokes has not been good. Carrington Valentine has not taken a significant step. There's nobody that's developing on the back end like a Corey Ballantyne or a Kalen King or a Kamal Haddon that, we've seen anything significant out of. And, Keyshawn Nixon has been, he's had his moments, right? We know that that's not going to be your ultimate answer. If you would have told me that this team had to go with a ton of Keyshawn Nixon on the outside with Carrington Valentine as the other and utilizing Javon Bullard in the slot, I'd have been like, that could be really, really bad. And I think actually overall it's probably slightly exceeded my expectations based on what I think it could be. I think it could be a lot worse than what we've seen so far, added on top of that by the fact that the pass rush has not been there. Now, that being said, I think you can look at the corner room as a whole and say it's just not good enough especially with Jair Alexander out of the lineup. I think with Jair and I think Jair, Carrington Valentine, Javon Bullard in the slot, I think you can make something work with that. Or even getting Nixon in there a little bit. I think you can make something work knowing that you've got a great safety tandem on the back end with Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney. I think it's workable. I think with Jair out, it definitely changes the calculus a little bit. And I think you've got to just recognize that the corner room isn't exactly where you want it to be right now. I think we can evaluate that in and of itself. The pass rush is making it worse. Like if you get pass rush and you can get those guys home quicker, it's going to make everyone's job easier. The linebackers in coverage is going to be easier. The defensive backs down the field is going to be easier. The fact that these quarterbacks have so much time in the pocket and it's actually not massively worse considering the depth of the cornerback position. Again, that's why I would actually say the cornerback position is slightly overachieved in that regard, just based on what my expectations would have been. So I think the pass rush is the bigger issue here, but I think you can also evaluate the corner room and say without Jair, it needs to be better if they really want to be a significant contending team. And there's time for that. I think Carrington Valentine can still take a step even within this season. And I think, again, hopefully Jair gets back and you can build a cornerback room that works, but they're going to have to try some things out and figure out a defensive backfield that works. And more importantly, hopefully at some point get the pass rush to a point where it just makes everyone's job easier. But to me, the pass rush is the bigger issue. but I think you can look at both and say they need both groups to be better. All right, let's see here. Hi, Andy. Have you or would you do a Packers game stream with Tom Grossi? Yeah, I mean, if Tom ever wanted to do something, we could definitely talk about it. Tom's super busy. I've talked to Tom in the past about, maybe doing something, but him and I are both just I know he's got chaotic good. I think we're both also just in chaotic worlds. So yeah, at some point, if there was an opportunity to do something with Cheesehead TV or Grossi or something like that, I would certainly consider it. But I do very much, it kind of works out well that Corey and Aaron and Tom do game day streams, right? And I kind of do the pregame and the postgame. So you can, and it depends on if it's, home game or away game for how I can do the pre and post game a little bit sometimes, because I go to the games in the press box, obviously. So that changes it. But a lot of times it works out well if I get to do the pregame, and then, Grossi and Negler and Corey get to do the during the game, the live streams. And then I get to do the post game. It's kind of and I get to then watch the game and really watch it from an analytical standpoint. So as soon as I can go to the post game, I can talk about it. And then, of course, as we do the show for the next day, I can feel like I actually got to be in the game and really break it down a little bit better than if I'm trying to do this and this and this and this and this. I think that's a little bit tougher, but at some point, maybe maybe Pack a Day, maybe I or somebody else or as a team, we do a live stream. I could see that being something that maybe eventually happens. But for now, really happy doing the pre and post game shows right before and after. And then I'll be on Autograph at halftime chatting there as well. Go Pack Go from Virginia. Love it. All right, Adam Rice. Andy, can't say enough how much I appreciate you doing this each and every day and being such a likable host. Am I just stupid, or would it not be a good idea to try Quay at the edge? We've talked about this in the past. Variety of different ways that we can go about this. And first of all, Adam, thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate that a ton. Let's talk about Quay Walker. As a linebacker, right? Let's evaluate him there first. To me, not good enough. Hasn't lived up to expectations. I still think there's ways you can utilize him as a linebacker, in some maybe obvious passing situations, QB spy as a blitzer, etc. I think there's ways you can sort of platoon him in and get him involved in the game. Now, today he's just going to be the full-time linebacker, especially with Edgerrin Cooper out. Your hands are probably just tied at this point. So he's going to be out there. I think he probably stays out there as the primary linebacker the remainder of the season, for better or worse. But I think there's still ways to utilize him as an off-ball linebacker. But I think we can all agree that the Quay Walker experience as an off-ball linebacker hasn't been ideal / good enough / what we wanted or expected. So then the question becomes, is there another position that you can utilize him at? And then really the only one that would make sense, right, is defensive end / edge rusher. I am not a Quay Walker edge rusher believer. Now, that being said, if you want to try him there and see if it works, I think sometimes, especially like you get like 70 snaps of defense a game, right? You get 17 games in the regular season. Like you've got time to try some crap, right? Like I would like to see Green Bay just throw a little bit more stuff at the wall. Let's get Tyron Hopper a handful of snaps. Let's elevate Jamin Davis for a game to see what he can do. Let's try Carl Brooks more at defensive end for a game instead of defensive tackle. Let's try Quay Walker at the edge. Let's try, I think there's opportunities to just try some of this stuff. Like, let's just see how it works. Because sometimes things surprise you and you're like, oh, like you get Chris Brooks out on the field and it's like you give him a couple carries and an opportunity to blitz pick up and you're like, oh yeah, that looks pretty good. We're going to do more of that. And sometimes you just don't know exactly what the right mixture is going to be. And sometimes things just all of a sudden click and they work. So I would like to try some stuff. So I'm not against hey, let's try Quay Walker at edge and let's just see what he can do. Now, the reason I'm not a believer, the size and speed is not there. He's not a skilled pass rusher. So if you want to talk about guys like LVN and those players not developing and not having a pass rush plan, Quay Walker does not have a pass rush plan. I've seen Quay Walker multiple times as a blitzer get stoned by a running back and not have a move against a running back or a tight end when he's been blitzing. I've seen him get absolutely stonewalled by offensive linemen who are waiting for him, and he has no way of getting off those blocks. So, and that's when he's coming as a surprise player, right? When they're not necessarily expecting him to blitz and they can pick him up with ease. I actually don't think he's a very good blitzer, even as a linebacker. He does a good job in like the pick game. Like he sometimes will do a good job of picking off a player so Edgerrin Cooper can get home, but him of himself getting off of blocks and coming as a blitzer has not actually been something that has been a massive strength of his. So if he's struggling with tight ends and running backs when it's been a surprise that he's going to come, all of a sudden lining him up on the outside as an undersized defensive end against skilled offensive tackles who know he's coming, that to me is probably not going to go very well. That's my belief. I don't think he has the size, strength, speed. The speed is there. The size, the strength, or the skills to be a pass rusher on the outside. Don't think he has any of those things. I think he'd get completely stonewalled. I don't think he can set the edge as a run defender. I can almost guarantee you he can't do that as a undersized, outside defensive end, right? You're talking about 220, 230 pounds where, you probably want to be closer to 250, 260 at times. So there's a variety of reasons why I don't think that would work, but I'll say it one more time. If you want to try some crap, I'm all about trying some crap. So do it. Like, let's see it for 5 snaps a game just to see if anything comes of it. If it doesn't, all right, let's scrap that. Let's figure something else out. But I'm always cool with like, hey, is there different things that we can try on defense to kind of make this work? And if there is, awesome. If there's not, then I guess try something different. But I don't know, try some things sometimes. But I don't think that would be one that would work, quite frankly. GM needs to project if the player will develop, but it's difficult to know how money will affect motivation. Yeah, I mean, that's the reason though that you're doing all these interviews and personality tests, and you're trying to figure out what a player's motivation is. And we hear all the time about Green Bay wanting football players, and we hear all the time about these guys being football junkies and how much they love the game and how much they're in the film room, right? So it doesn't seem like that there's a major issue there with the want to and the desire. But yes, that is something that's hard. But again, that's why you sort of maybe sometimes lean towards the players that you don't have to develop quite as much, that there's not as much of a guesswork as to will they develop. And here's the other thing too. Like, I think that's a tough thing to calculate of like, well, LVN has all this room for growth. All right. Well, what makes you think that, like, just because let's just take Christian Gonzalez, right? Because he's there. Just because Christian Gonzalez is good now, what makes you think that he doesn't also have significant room for growth? Like, just because like one player is still raw or has upside or whatever, like, established players that have been good in college also have a level of upside. There are still things that you can teach them and help them grow and develop with their specific traits as well. None of these guys are finished products coming out. So if you're drafting a player that's already shown that they can be really good and you can take them and then you can still elevate their game, that to me is more often than not the better way to go. Now, sometimes you don't have the ability to be super picky and choosy, right? At quarterback is one of those. If a Jordan Love falls to you and you think that you can give him that time to develop and he can become a legitimate starter, quarterback, sometimes you have to play that card. It's a little bit different. You almost want to take the time with the quarterback. Some of these guys that are getting forced in right away are not always having the success. So I think there are exceptions. Defensive tackle. Now, Devontae Wyatt, they didn't take the 21-year-old with raw upside, right? They took the guy that was supposed to be ready right away. And sometimes, like, this is a great proof of, like, sometimes that doesn't work either. And that just kind of goes to the evaluation aspect of it. But with defensive tackles, there are so few and they're very rare. Offensive linemen sometimes the same thing, where sometimes you have to be a little bit more patient with some of those positions. But on the whole, especially pass rusher, corner, some of those things where you can kind of plug and play a little bit more, I kind of just want the guy that's going to be able to come in and play right away and be good and have that potential to take a jump. And I think they've been in positions to do that. And I think more often than not, they've taken the developmental guy. I just don't think they've had the payoff from that. And I think that's why at some point you have to take a look at it and say, hey, is there a way where we need to change up our philosophy on this a little bit? And I think it's at least time to have, at minimum, the conversation of, hey, like this first round pick thing ain't working for us. We got to be better at it. And I'm sure they're evaluating everything. I guarantee you they are, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. Dylan gifted 10 Pack-A-Day podcast memberships. Dylan, thank you so much for that. Appreciate you a ton. Always love seeing you in the chat, my friend. And I'm sure I'll see you more post game in some of our members Q&As coming up this week, but thank you so much for that, Dylan. I hope to see another big Watson game today. That would be awesome as well. Jordan Love needs to get a handle on the interceptions. Teams are getting a lock on him. I think it's been a little bit different in the types of interceptions, right? The Arizona one is a fluke one. There have been a couple bad decisions. There's a bad throw this past week. So I don't know as much as it's teams getting a lock on him as just needs to take a little bit better care of the football. I did it for my prize pick selection today. I'm going Jordan Love, fewer than 1/2 interceptions. This is not an ad. I'm legitimately telling you I did put this one in. So I'm going Jordan Love, fewer than 1/2 interception. And I'm going that he cleans it up today. No picks for Jordan Love. At what point today does Quay lose his spot and Eric Wilson takes over? I hope that I'm wrong, but I see today as a difficult one for Quay. Yeah, I mean, if they haven't decided that that's been something that they want to do yet, I don't know what it's going to take at this point. And I don't think they do it mid-game. I think if Quay really struggles in this one again, I think maybe next week, or maybe it takes Cooper coming back at some point and then they make that switch. But I don't see it happening mid-game. But hopefully Quay just goes out and balls out. I think that's what I'm always going to hope for. And, even if I don't necessarily expect it, I'm certainly cheering on Quay, and I hope he goes out and just crushes it today and has one of the best games of his career. And hopefully he can have one of those amazing pick sixes like we saw, what I think was early last year, and just make some big time impact plays, because one, he's due for it. And two, I would love to see him maybe gain a little bit of confidence at that position. Dylan, yes, that's awesome. Glad you got a membership, my friend. Enjoy. Wilson over Walker. I would be for it. I don't see it happening. Yes, that will always be a conversation. This team has a talent, might be too young yet. I don't think it's going to be a youth thing, to be honest. But I think I think they just have to gain experience in the season. I think they have to grow. I think they will. I think we saw that in the second half of last year. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe again, today's an opportunity, right? When Quay was out the game a few weeks ago, Hopper got no snaps. Today, Edgerrin Cooper's out. Could Hopper get a few snaps in this one? We'll see. I hope so. I hope he gets a handful of snaps at least, but I'm not holding my breath at the moment either. Go Pack Go. LVN is disappointing. Agreed. Go Pack Go. Checking in. Matt, good to see you, my friend. Excited to talk to you on Pack-A-Day Radio this week. Tuesday, right? 8:20 a.m. Pack-A-Day Radio. Matt Freilich will be joining me. We'll be talking hopefully a huge win over the 49ers and starting to preview Packers and Dolphins. I don't know what Gary is doing this year. When is he going to play? He has been better as of late, made those 2 big plays at the end of this past game, really with the game on the line. Really should have probably won the game right there when they're in 3rd and 19. Not his fault that the defense gave up the next 2 plays and Kingsley Enagbare missed a sack, but there have been a little bit more signs from Rashawn Gary. Now, he still needs to be better. I'm not disagreeing there. I think there still needs to be a better impact, but there have been signs of progress and growth from Rashawn, and hopefully he's going to peak at the right time and just kind of take over for the remainder of the season. Feel like the offense hits usually hit and the misses are on the defense. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, the defensive drafts have been a struggle, right? Like you can look just at the ROI that's been put on, or like the resources, I should say, that have been put on this defense and trying to get ROI out of it. You've got, well, we've gone through this a million times, right? But you've got Kenny Clark, who's a big time investment at defensive tackle. You've got Devontae Wyatt as a 1st-round pick, LVN as a 1st-round pick, Rashawn Gary, who's a 1st-round pick, and a bunch of resources put into, at linebacker, 2nd-round pick, Edgerrin Cooper, 1st-round pick, Quay Walker, 3rd-round pick, Tyron Hopper. At corner, 1st-round pick and major money into Jair Alexander. A pretty significant, like one of the top slot contracts in all of football to Keyshawn Nixon in the slot. A 1st-round pick on Eric Stokes. And then a huge contract to Xavier McKinney, a 2nd-round pick on Javon Bullard. Obviously, a previous 1st-round pick on Darnell Savage that did not work out already. So yeah, I might even be missing on some top draft picks / free agents. Obviously, Preston Smith was a big time free agent, so on and so forth. But there's a ton of money, 1st-round picks, 2nd-round picks, 3rd-round picks, and free agent signings and free agent money and re-signings put into that defense. It's hard to look at it and be like, yeah, they're really just crushing it right now. And I can guarantee you it's going to be another offseason filled with defensive pickups, because that's where the issues primarily still are, and where they need to continue to get better. And their offense is basically set for next year. The only 2 players that could potentially leave on offense, unless they trade somebody away, would be Josh Myers and Andre Dillard. And Dillard obviously hasn't played a snap. So Myers is the only one that you're, potentially losing. And you could go in tomorrow and play without Josh Myers, and it wouldn't, although we did see some snap issues outside of that, wouldn't be a huge issue, right? So a lot of the resources in the draft and in the offseason probably going to go towards defense again. Needs to be better. Disappointed in the 4-3 defense. Yeah, again, like I think scheme stuff is still a little bit overblown. Here's like, regardless of what 3-4-4-3, right? And again, there's different versions of zone coverage and man coverage and things that you're working. At the end of the day, almost every single defense in the NFL right now has 2 pass rushers on the outside, 2 interior defensive linemen on the inside, 2 linebackers that are playing off-ball linebacker, a slot corner, 2 outside corners, 2 safeties. How they utilize those players is a little bit different. The size, speed, structure of those, and the 15% of the game or that they go into base defense, it can be a little bit different. Whether the defensive end on the outside or the edge rusher on the outside is standing up or has their hand in the dirt can be a little bit different. But at the end of the day, 2 pass rushers, 2 interior defensive linemen, 2 off-ball linebackers, slot corner, 2 outside corners, 2 safeties. That's the NFL. And you know what? All of the job descriptions with a little bit of nuance: pass rushers, get to the quarterback; interior defensive linemen, hold up against blocks, and if you can, get that penetration, get to the quarterback. 2 off-ball linebackers, a lot of zone coverage, sideline to sideline speed, wrapping and tackling, rallying to the football, same job description. Slot corner, outside corners, like the safeties in the back end. There are different things that work better. I don't think there's any question that this Jeff Hafley defense has been more creative, more innovative, and I just more aesthetically pleasing to watch than what Joe Barry's defense was. But at the end of the day, your players are the ones that have to go make the plays. And there's not a ton of difference overall in the job descriptions that you're asking any of these guys to do. And players have to go out and play. They have to make big plays. At no point last week, Jeff Hafley brought blitzes. He brought 3-man rushes. He brought 4, 5, 6, 7. He did a bunch of creative stuff. At some point, players have to go out and make plays. There wasn't outside of Rashawn Gary in that little 2-game stretch. There wasn't any player who just went out and made plays last week at any time. It didn't feel like a corner was ever going to jump a route and get his hands on a ball. It didn't ever feel like a linebacker was going to go force a big fumble or lay a big hit. There was no defensive linemen who were getting home against a bad Bears offensive line. There was just nobody that was going out and making a play. At some point, scheme is just scheme. And you've got to go out and actually make plays on the field. And I would say to me, there was a question going into the season, right? With all this talent, we just talked about all the first round picks and the money that was put into this defense. The question really became, all right, was this, did they get the wrong players, or are these players being utilized in the incorrect way? I think through 10 games so far this season, I think you're probably looking at more, yeah, they got the wrong players in a lot of situations. LVN, Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, Eric Stokes. I think you can point to a lot of those and say, yeah, this wasn't a scheme thing. This wasn't what they were being asked to do. That wasn't the problem. You just got the wrong guys. And so that's now the evaluation. So I don't look at this as much as the 4-3 or Jeff Hafley being super disappointing so far. I like a lot of the things that I've seen. I don't think the Chicago game was a great game for Hafley overall from a play calling standpoint. I thought Thomas Brown and the Bears were a step ahead of him a good chunk of the day. But to me, this is more talent and playmaking on defense than it is scheme or defensive coordinator at this point. TJ Watt, I don't care if TJ Watt had any interest in being in Wisconsin anymore. That is zero interest to me as a GM. If I want to draft a player and bring him to Green Bay, he would have been fine. Like, it's not like he's going to sit out and be like, nope, I'm not playing here. He would have played. So that to me does not factor into anything whatsoever. All right, so get back to Kyle in a second here. Dylan, is Green Bay's strength and conditioning staff taking more risks with injuries under the new leadership? I don't think so, Dylan. I think they made a huge mistake in playing Jair last week, and maybe that's just with the benefit of hindsight, but clearly he was not ready. And clearly, it's now much worse that he's got to start basically from scratch with re-injuring it. So, but no, I don't think so. I think they've been, for the most part, still cautious. I think, getting your quarterback out there, if he's 75% because he's your starting quarterback, is the norm all throughout the league. And Jordan didn't re-aggravate anything. He unfortunately had a groin injury. It's tough to say whether or not it was because he was overcompensating for the MCL. It didn't seem like it. If you look at that play, it just looks like it, he kind of landed funny. And it just kind of did something. So to me, I don't think so. If anything, I think the Jair Alexander decision was a dumb one, but I think on the whole, they've been kind of the same as always in that regard. All right. Let's see here. So I totally agree about the later round pick values, but our first round contracts are guaranteed. So guys like LVN, Stokes, Morgan getting a lot of money to sit and really not turn out. Yeah, I mean, late round picks, like, you're not looking at those as like, oh my God, they have these huge salary cap hits. It's only if you pick up their 5th year option where you start getting into like 10+ million, and they did not pick up Stokes. Savage decision was wrong. And obviously they'll have LVN and Morgan, but like even the late first round picks don't have these massive cap hits, right? So yes, it's a little bit more guaranteed, but like, they're still good enough for the most part to be on those contracts. But to me, it's more of a wasted opportunity to potentially get somebody better. Yeah, Gary needs to be better. LVN usually pushes his blockers back nicely. Have not given up on him. I don't disagree. And again, I'm very much in the camp of I'm not all the way out on LVN. Not at all. We're a year and a half in. It needs to be better. His pass rush plan is bad. It needs to be better. He needs to work on his technique. But I'm not there yet. This is still very early in the process. But I will absolutely say that it's not meeting expectations so far. It's behind schedule is where I would say it is right now. Super talented player. I really think that he is. And I don't have him graded anywhere near as bad as PFF does. I will agree that as a pass rusher, it's been ugly and it needs to be a lot better. But I do think there's still good things that he does on the field. I don't think he's like a complete net negative out there. But if you're looking at expected value and what expectations are, he's well below, and he's still, I think, behind schedule. Even if you're looking at him as a developmental pass rusher that would take a couple years, I think he's still behind where you would want him to be at this point. Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, that's a tough thing. I mean, it's a really unbelievable group of pass rushers right now. I don't necessarily need him to be top 5, but I would like him to be really good. I'd like him to be in the top 20, I'd like him to be in the top 15 if possible. But I don't really care where he lands in that group. I just want him to see him be a really, really good pass rusher. Right now, he's been okay to good to out. He's been fine, but not where I need him to be. And I would say Gary's playing better, but it's not, again, to the level that it needs to be at this point. Love's still making mistakes and interceptions. Yeah, we know. He'll get better. I promise. I can't relax. We are paying this man a bag. Are we talking about Rashawn? Yeah, it's true. With Jordan Morgan's recurring shoulder troubles, does he need to be exclusively at offensive tackle? Maybe offensive guard is just a little too in the phone booth for him. I don't think so, Aaron. I think he just had that one injury, and then he kept re-aggravating it over and over. So it's not like he had a right shoulder injury and then a left shoulder injury and then an oblique injury and then a hip injury or something like that. He's big enough. He's physical enough. I don't see it that way at all. I just think he got one injury and then just it kind of kept reoccurring, right? So I don't think that's going to be a problem for him. How many touchdowns, interceptions does Love have today? 3-0. 3 touchdowns, no picks. Maybe one of those is a running touchdown, but he'll have 3 touchdowns in some capacity, no interceptions. Reminder that the Packers are 7-3 and getting healthier. I don't know if I totally agree getting healthier. Jair Alexander is a very big injury. And every week you usually pile up more injuries, right? You don't usually necessarily get less. So there's probably going to be injuries out of this game, and Jair's and Edgerrin Cooper. I mean, Cooper being out is big, and Jair being potentially out for a while is significant. So Luke Musgrave is still out. So yes, they're healthy-ish, but there are still some key injuries on this team right now. I agree. I also wish the Niners were healthy. I wish this was a great one-on-one game against two great teams, but it'll still be a battle. I don't have any doubt about that. I am not a believer in playing Malik Willis. I have full, unquestioning, unwavering faith in Jordan Love. He's the guy. You wouldn't take out, any of your great quarterbacks to put in a gadgety quarterback. So nope, I'm 1,000,000% on the keep Jordan in bandwagon. Can't stand San Francisco. I can understand that. San Francisco will be done this year pretty much if Green Bay can pick up this win. If you give them hope, if you give them a win in this one and they pick up a win and they get Purdy and Bosa back next week, then look the heck out. Then things can change very, very quick. So end them now while you can. Double Dylan's in the super chats today. Did the way you watch the game change after you got a media credential or at all during the time you've been covering the team? If so, how? Not credential related. No, that certainly has not changed it. I do think just over the years and the evolution of everything, it's changed the way that I watch the game. I don't know that that's necessarily related completely to me just covering the team. There's pieces of it. So I think just as you watch more and more football, more and more games, and certainly when you do it from watching the all 22 on every player and every play, there's certainly some things that are going to change in how you watch the game, right? Certainly things that you look for a little bit more of, not just watching the ball quite as much and not necessarily, again, riding the wave of like good play, bad play, understanding that there's kind of going to be some of that throughout the course of the game. So you ride the wave of emotion less. And by the way, I'm not saying that that's better. Like I miss some of that. I miss some of the, oh my God, like the like riding the wave of emotion in a game is sort of a fun thing from time to time, right? To be super pissed off when things go wrong and be just unbelievably jubilant when things go great. Like I miss that from time to time. I think I still get it when I go to the like in the stands as a fan. Like you can, I still can do that a little bit. But I think for the most part, it's the biggest change has been, again, doing this for so long, watching so many games and seeing it from a different perspective. So I think that changes it. But I don't think it's specifically due to being credentialed or doing the podcast or anything like that. I think if anything, again, it's just it's a degree of difference in how you watch the game. And I think there's times where I can't quite turn off that analytical mind, right? And then just be a pure, just happy fan or unhappy fan. There's always sort of that, analysis that's going on at all times, but I still get to be a fan. I still get to cheer, and I still, I obviously can't cheer in the press box, but still get to cheer on the team and do everything. And that hasn't changed. And that to me is sort of one of the things that was always a deal breaker for me is I never wanted me doing any of the work from a Packers standpoint to really affect my joy of being a Packers fan. And up until this point, it is not. I enjoy watching the Packers as a fan every single week, still cheer on the team, obviously bleed green and gold. So Yeah, that part hasn't changed, but I do think just the way that you sort of analytically watch a game is tougher to tune out. I think where I can still appreciate it a lot more is in playoff games or must-win games, like if it's a Week 18 win to get in, and those that your fandom is just on ultimate high, right? Like every play matters immensely, and you are riding the wave of emotion. So I get to feel that a little bit more. I think in regular season, there's more a more even keelness and just kind of analyzing what's going well, what's not going well sort of aspect. But for the most part, still get to be a fan, still very happy with how everything's going. Good question, though. All right, I have to get out of here in about 2 minutes, guys. Going to try to get to a couple of one of these member chats really quick. Move the mic is giving the gravely nasally sound. Then maybe the mic is this better? Check. I don't know. I think maybe I only woke up like 15 minutes before I started doing this, so maybe that had something to do with it. How's everyone doing on game day? Excited for today and hoping for a clean win over San Francisco. Sign me up for that. I don't know what that's in regards to. You don't take love off the field for Willis unless it's an injury. Totally agreed. Lack of pass rush means we lean in on our corners. Yep. Yeah, I mean, you just have to cover longer, right? So it just makes everyone's job harder when you're not getting that pass rush. Happy Thanksgiving, y'all. Go Pack Go. Thanks, Dylan. This Thanksgiving, I'm especially thankful for the AFC South for single-handedly rescuing our season. Yeah, they've had a lot of success. 4-0 against the South, and what are they? 7, so 3-3 against everyone else. So yes, thank you to the AFC South. We appreciate you. 49ers game plan going to be very similar to the Bears last week. Have to get some turnovers. Connor, we just talked about that. You may have beat me to it earlier. I don't know when I talked about it and when you got in. You were probably earlier because it looks like you were at 11-11. So you probably beat me to it. Tad Samato, lots of redshirt year players this season. That's not necessarily different for Green Bay, but you're talking about Jacob Monk, Catano, Adapo, Travis Glover. Obviously, any of the guys on the practice squad are basically redshirting like a Kalen King. So yeah, a lot of guys that are getting some experience by not getting experience on the field, and we'll see how that plays out. No turnovers for 2 weeks, I believe. Time is now. I do think they'll get some turnovers in this game. My 10-year-old daughter, Amelia, wants to know if you think the Packers are going to win today. Go Pack Go. I do. I think they win by 10, 30-20 Packers in this one. Matt, do you think the reason our cornerbacks are seemingly less effective this year is scheme, Barry versus Hafley, or talent injury? I think talent injury and lack of pass rush is where I would go on that one, Matt. Battle of the Dylans. Yes, I love it. Too bad my name is spelled wrong. I know, Dylan. Come on, step your game up. What's your favorite behind the scenes moment with a player? I don't know that I have. So I'm even forgetting who it was now. It was a safety, and I forget what his name was. It was just like a journeyman safety. But I was in the locker. This is one of my very first times in the locker room. Man, it's going to bother me. I can't remember his name, but it was like one of my very first times in the locker room. And I just go like in like assuming that nobody really knows who I am or like cares or whatever. And like he walks by and he's like, "Hey, Andy, how's it going?" And I'm like, I've never introduced myself. I don't, I've never had an interaction with him before. And it was just like this moment like, oh, okay. Like it was just a cool moment. And then like earlier this year, Bo Melton walked by me, and I was at training camp practice, and it's like, "Hey man, how's it going?" And I'm like, "It's going well." And I didn't know if like, again, my assumption is just like, oh, he just thinks I'm some fan walking along the sidelines or whatever, and just like being cordial and nice. And then like the next time, like it happened again where Bo Melton, then like he just like kind of came up and like gave me a fist bump. It's like it's something like, I don't know if it was I appreciate you or something like that, of like just like moments like that where like, I think I've like he's probably I've been a pretty big Bo Melton supporter. I think he's super talented, and I'm very excited anytime he gets on the field. I think there's a lot there. So I mean, I don't know if he's seen some of that or heard some of that or whatever. So maybe there was just that appreciation there or whatever. But like those are just cool moments of like, I don't really expect that. If anything, I just kind of expect all the Packers to hate me because I have to evaluate and sometimes be harsh on players. So, and as I said the other day, if I were them, just ignore me completely. That's probably the best way to go about it. But no, it's been cool when some of those players have kind of come up and shown any level of appreciation. Oh, the other one was too, this wasn't me related, but Nagler and I were standing together, and this is before a training camp practice, and Randall Cobb just got to Green Bay, traded from, when the whole Rodgers situation happened, traded back from Houston. Packers pick him up in the trade. And he comes out and he's just giddy. And he's like, he comes up and gives, like, he puts his arms around us. It's like, "I am so happy to see you guys." And like, you could just like, it was like, he was free. He was so happy, so excited. And it's Randall Cobb. So like, he didn't know who I was. He was more, he knew Aaron was more, but it was just like, just to see Randall Cobb, like just beaming from head to toe because he was back in Green Bay, back with Aaron, so excited about everything. That was kind of a cool moment as well. So, yep. All right, 34-28 Packers, 34-20, go Pack go. Oz the Mentalist predict 34-27 Packers before the season. I've never seen him be wrong before. I bet the Packers -1, and I am stoked. It wouldn't shock me. That dude is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. I still I said this the other day. I need to go and research how he does this stuff because I always like taking a peek behind the curtain. Like my algorithm on shorts and TikTok and stuff is very definitely has some of the how magicians do stuff. I'm always fascinated by that. So I got to look into that further because he's really unbelievable in what he does. So hopefully I would like him to be a little bit wrong. I'd like it to be 34-17 Packers, but you know what? If it's 34-27 and he nails that on the spot, I'll take it, I guess, in that regard. All right, guys, I got to get out of here. Got to get the kid to basketball practice. I'll see you live after the game, post-game show. I think 8:30 is when I should be back and able to do it. I might need to push it back to 8:45 or 9 o'clock. So I'll keep you posted on that. But it should be going live as soon as I get back home after the game. I'm hoping somewhere right around 8:30. So I will see you guys then. You're the absolute best. Enjoy the game. Go Pack, go. Packers win 30-20. Until next time. And as always, go Pack, go.